All right, so today we're gonna talk about, so for 7 weeks now, we have been dealing with new forms and or revised forms or something, and we've had a lot of questions over the last few weeks on some of the forms, and so we're gonna take just a little bit here, and we're just gonna do some refreshers on it. Some of this stuff is going to look familiar to you, and some, we have new people sitting in here that everything's a refresher. So anyway, so we're gonna go through this a little bit. We're probably not gonna go through as much detail as if we were training each form new. But we're at least gonna hit on the highlights of it and the things that are important and the things that have been popping up in people's minds. So with that in mind, tell you what, let me make us a little smaller. And make this a little bigger. There we go. All right, so now we're in a position that you can see what we're talking about. So 2024 revisions and refreshers. And we're just kind of gonna, there's, for one thing, there's no, there's nothing like in sync here, like you have to do this one before you do that one, before you do this one or anything. It's just ones that we've been having a lot of questions and issues on. And the first one that I put in here was wood balconies and stairs addendum. Now, if you are selling a property or representing a buyer at with a property. And it contains 3 or more units. And it has more than 1 story. The likelihood of it having some stairs and balconies or decks or other structure, maybe a patio of some kind, who knows what it is. But there's a chance that it has some kind of a structure. When you look at the house, if it has those in any way, shape, or form, then we need to include this wood balconies and stairs addendum. And what it has to do with is there's a law that came out, and actually I wrote on here to the side that it was extended to January 1st, 26. It was supposed to take effect January of 25, but they have extended it to 26 because everybody was having a little trouble getting it done. But there's a law that came into play this year that said that by the January 2025, we were supposed to have all of the units similar to what I just talked about, the ones that are 3 or more units and more than 1 story. And we were talking about, or they were talking about health and safety code that would require those to be inspected. And the inspections were to be completed by January 1st of 2025. Now, the date on that has been extended to where those inspections do not have to take place now until January 1 of 26. But you know what happens with that? You're going to sell property or list property sometime during the course of the year that is going to have some kind of balconies or stairways or decks or something. And those will happen during the course of the year, and the actual requirement for inspection has to be in somebody's hands by January 1st, 26. So if you just think of that, anything you list during the course of this year. I mean, if it takes 2 months to sell it and a month to close it and things like that, anything that happens during the course of the year, this is going to impact. It's either going to impact a seller who gets towards the end of the year and they have to disclose to people the inspection. And the inspection may require work to be done, in which case your buyer doesn't want to be the one paying for the work. Or the buyer has to be aware that he's going to be the one paying for the work because he's buying the property in July. And that by January, we've got to have the inspections done and work in the process and things like that. So when you're selling condominium, that's the most likely, but when we sell triplexes that are 2-story or fourplex that's 2-story or something, any of those things all fall into this. So to me, it makes most sense to just start getting this signed every time you take a listing, and then it goes to the buyer for a signature as part of the disclosures. And so you have everybody sign off on it down here. The buyer signs, the seller signs. There's this little note here that said authorized inspectors. And actually, they have added civil engineers to this because of, the reason they extended it in the first place is because they couldn't get people out to inspect them quickly. So even though calls were being made and things to try to have it happen by January 1st, 2025, they couldn't get it done because they didn't have enough people that could go out there and do that. So they have included civil engineers to this. So now civil, structural engineer, building contractor, holding different license classifications that allow them to do concrete work and woodwork and things. They're expanding the amount of people that can actually do those inspections. So the intent of that is to be able to get all the inspections done this year. But just remember, whether you're a buyer or a seller, you're gonna be impacted by this. If you're a seller right now, today, and you have something listed and it's got those wood steps in, if you don't tell somebody about it, if you don't give them a disclosure that at least says that the inspections have to be done this year, then later on this year, they're gonna come back after you because you didn't tell them that. So it becomes a disclosure item, right? You get to January, you get to December, you get to November or something, it's already closed escrow, they've been in the house for 5 months, 6 months, whatever it is. And then all of a sudden they get this notification that says that we have no record that your house has been, or that your complex has been inspected. Please submit. And you go, what are you talking about? So it's a disclosure that even though it doesn't actually, the process doesn't have to start. We actually have to let people know about the process. All right. So let's just talk about, and this is funny that this is coming up, but it's funny how many times it's come up in the last little bit. The real estate transfer disclosure statement. We know, and we call it a TDS. Where do we get those magic numbers from? Right here. It's whatever CAR decided to attach to it, but this is the TDS, transfer disclosure statement. And there's a couple of things that people seem to be confused about that I want to make sure that you understand. One is that if this is a duplex or a triplex or a fourplex, that is still 1 to 4 single family residence, is it not? If it's any of those, it's still a 1 to 4, and as a 1 to 4, a TDS is required on each unit individually. And that should make perfect sense anyway, because you could have a stove not working in one, you could have an air conditioner not working in another, you could have dishwashers not working in another, you could have crappy carpet in another, whatever it happens to be. This will enlighten people as to what's going on. So it becomes a disclosure in each unit. And we've had people send these in, strangely enough. But they've put these up and they'll say it has a range. They'll check that it has a range, but then they'll put over to the side in 3 units. They'll just hand right in there. Or no range in unit A, or whatever it happens to be. Well, okay, so you can see how that doesn't make sense to not have a TDS for each unit. So you have a TDS for each unit. And it says that right up here at the top. You can check this box, this property is a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, and a TDS is required for all units. All right, now, second thing on the TDS, which has brought up some questions, which is okay, that's good, questions are good. Means you're reading it, or at least somebody's reading it, but room additions, structural modifications, or other alterations or repairs not in compliance with building codes. Now, we have lots of those. You know, we have converted garages, somebody put a bedroom in, or they call it a bedroom because their oldest son sleeps out there but there's no window to it and there's no air conditioning to it. He has to have his own little space unit to try to keep it warm or to keep it cool, whatever the case may be, and things. You can do whatever you want when you live in your own house, pretty much. When it comes time to sell it, that's when the issues arise. When it comes time to get a loan on it, that's when the issues arise. So things happen along the way. So it says that if transferor acquired the property within 18 months of accepting an offer to sell it, transferor shall make additional disclosures regarding room additions and structural modifications. And they'll do that on the seller property questionnaire, which we're gonna go into next. But why do you think the transferor, if the property were acquired within the last 18 months, it makes a difference? Well, the additional paperwork we're looking for at that time is if I'm selling it within 18 months of when I bought it, I probably bought it with the intention of flipping it. I probably did not buy it with the intention of living there for next year or so and then moving on. Maybe, but probably not. So it probably is an investor unit. There was an intent to make some money on it, which is okay. I've done that before. It works well most of the time. I can think of once that it didn't for me, but most of the time it works out pretty well. But the additional paperwork at that point in time becomes things like permits, maybe contractors' invoices or something that shows that it costs $14,000 to frame this unit or whatever it was, and we actually have invoices on it. So the additional disclosures will come out with the SPQ. All right. So anyway, that's just a little highlighted area. If you check no, there aren't none here, that's great. If you check yes, there are. Then in any case on the TDS, you have to go down here to this blank area and write in what it actually is. Added on screen room June of 2020 or whatever it happens to be. Notice on here, and people, they ask this all the time. Not all the time, but they ask this a lot. One of the things right here that it talks about these codes that involve the smoke detectors and the carbon monoxide detectors and water heater strapping and blah, 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 those kind of things. That's what these codes are involved in. And people say, well, do I have to do that? Well, yes, you have to do that. For one thing, it's required by law that the house has working smoke detectors, working carbon monoxide detectors, water heaters strapped and braced and things. Those are required by law. But here is where the seller is agreeing that the property, as of the close of escrow, will be in compliance. All right, so they're signing here right now saying that as of the day that we close escrow, and hopefully before that, we will be in compliance at the latest as of close of escrow. Now, we encourage them from the start, we encourage them to get those things done within the first week of putting their house on the market. Because when an appraiser comes out, they are looking for those things. And then it's going to become a lender required repair anyway. So let's get them taken care of quickly. But they do sign and agree to take care of that. Be sure to take the time to explain that to them. When we read, one thing we do, and this is with all forms, this isn't with the TDS only or anything else, but one thing we do is a lot of us are really smart on the computer and things, and we send out, we'll put something in SkySlope and send it out of there for e-signatures. We'll send it right out of the CAR zip form websites. We'll send it straight from there for AuthentiSigns, and some of them will be printed out and send out DocuSign. And however, we do a lot of e-signing. I would probably guess that probably more than 50% of these things are done by e-signatures right now anyway. And so it's important that we still take the time to explain to people what it is that they're signing. They get this thing in the mail and, or in the email, and all of these little boxes, they have a chance to check. But do they know what they checked? And do they know why they checked it? And if they checked it, yes, do they know what they're supposed to put in there as far as an explanation? And it's just important for us to walk through them, even if we're on email. And what I usually try to do and what I try to teach is that you can send things out. I love the e-signatures. That's great. Everything comes back and it's all signed. Sometimes sometimes all of these things are done by a TC. And so as an agent, have I really seen what anybody put in there? Do I take the time to review it? Or do I just say, okay, well, my TC got the transfer disclosure statement back and it's in SkySlope now? And that's it. And so do I actually review it to find out what they put in there, to see if there was anything that I saw that they didn't, or vice versa? That's an important part of what this is. On here, we at Century 21 Masters always check the agent visual inspection disclosure. We always use the Avid. And that gives us a breakdown on what we saw and what we didn't see and things. Not all brokerages are required to do that, and we can't require them to do that. This could come back to you with just a little box checked here that says agents notes the following items. And they could put, you know, worn carpet in hallway, broken window in sliding door or whatever, and they could just put some things in there. And those are the things that the agent supposedly noticed. But notice this is part above here, above where you sign. You sign here if you're listing it, you sign here if you're selling it, but you should still do a review. And you should still do an Avid, no matter which side you're on. And notice in both cases, it says the undersigned based on a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection of the accessible areas of the property. So did I actually do a reasonably competent and diligent visual inspection? And that's what I'm signing off on. I'm saying, yes, I did. And so there's a little bit of, well, there's certainly some liability there if you don't put anything and the whole house is falling apart. And you didn't do an Avid and the whole house is falling apart. So we require an Avid every time. So no matter whether you're representing the buyer or the seller, and even if the other agent won't sign off on it, because there is a place here for both agents and both buyers and sellers. And if the other agent says, well, we don't do those, my broker doesn't require them. We can't mandate what they do, but we can just make a little note in there that says broker does not require this. So exempt seller. So there are some people who are exempt from completing a TDS and who does not have to provide an SPQ. And those, notice at the top, I highlighted the thing that says this property is a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, and ESD, just like the TDS is required for all units, and ESD is required for all units. So ESD is exempt seller disclosure. And what it says here is that for some reason, whatever the reason is, the seller is not, does not represent the property in any way other than a signature because they have never lived in the property. And so they don't know what's going on with the property. Those people could be a successor trustee whose parents passed away, and the only time they were in the property was to visit for Sunday dinner sometimes. They are not required to have a TDS and an SPQ. We can't expect them to know all the things that are going on in the house. And they might, Maybe mom and dad talk all the time and mom and daughter talk all the time and maybe everybody knows, but they're not required by law to know. So if they're a successor trustee, if they are a power of attorney who does not reside on the property. So my mom is 91 years old and one of my brothers has a power of attorney. And he's not required to know what goes on in her house for purposes of selling it. Maybe we are representing a bank as a that has foreclosed on a property. Maybe we're representing a limited liability corporation or a limited liability
I
partnership.
have a question from Rosa.
Rosa,
Says, hi Randy, what if it's a fixer and needs a lot of work?
if it's a fixer and needs a lot of work, so you're talking from a standpoint of if you own the property and you are, and you know that it needs a lot of work, then the idea is that you still, that if you're living there,
As a realtor,
oh, as a realtor. Okay, let's get to the SPQ here in just a second, okay? As a realtor, obviously, you're not expected to know anything other than what you can see with a reasonably diligent visual inspection. So you're not expecting to know everything, but we'll cover that in just a minute on the SPQ. So let's finish this up here on the exempt seller, and that is that if you have one of those titles, successor trustee, power of attorney, executor of a probate, if you're representing a corporation or something, you haven't ever lived there. I don't know whether anything's happened. There are some things that you probably would know. However, maybe not. But it says here, are you, and you the seller, and if you're representing that estate or that house or whatever it is, if you're representing them, then you are the seller. So are you the seller aware of any of the following? You can check no if you are not aware. That's legal. If you had no, because you weren't aware of any of those things, then you're okay. If somebody came back to you later and said, you didn't know that your dad died on the property? You checked no, that's gonna be pretty hard to explain if there's any kind of a arbitration or court case that comes up as a result of that. So I mean, answer it the way, have them answer it the way that they really know, but make sure that they understand. If they check yes to within the last 3 years, I had questions recently about, well, they were actually out in the backyard or out in the backfield working on something and had a heart attack. Okay, so were they an occupant of the property? And was it on their property where they had the heart attack? It's not in their house, it doesn't say in their house or anything, it says on the property, so if it happens on the property, then yes, it happened on the property. And that's not necessarily I mean, obviously it's a negative for the family that's involved in things, it's not necessarily a negative for the sale. There are some people that have it in their minds that that's bad luck if somebody died in the property or in the house or in the bedroom or whatever it happened to be. And that's okay, people believe that and that's important to them. And other people, well, what I've seen for the most part is that most people don't care. And they know that that happens all the time, and so it's just, to them, it's just a house. And so it's not necessarily negative. There are some people say, oh, well, you know what, I don't know if I should, if we say that, aren't we going to, cause this not to sell? And my answer to it is probably not. That's probably not a cause. If you've priced it right and the house is nice, then I don't think it'll cause a problem, but perhaps it could. So anyway, we go through and we answer these questions the best we can. Multiple listing service addendum. Okay, this comes out every time you click residential listing agreement in the CAR forms, then it's gonna pop out with, this is going to come out with it. It's going to have a disclosure regarding relationship, agency relationships. It's going to have a fair housing, it's gonna have, anyway, it's gonna have several forms to download. This is one of the ones that's gonna download. And this actually was really important when it first came out, but then when it just came out more recently, it came out with a revision that made it a little bit that took one of the things out of it, but this talks about what an MLS is. I don't know if we want to, how much you're gonna have to go over that with people. If they're fussing against putting it in an MLS, you might wanna read that to them or read it with them or something. But let's talk about the things that actually affect us. One is this clear cooperation policy. And the clear cooperation policy was put in place by the MLS. And it was put in the MLS a few years ago. That basically says that if you're a member of the MLS, the clear cooperation policy of NAR, the National Association of Realtors, requires that you do some things. And most MLSs have adopted the clear cooperation policy, and what it's trying to do is it's trying to make sure that if you're gonna live, that it's trying to make sure that if you're gonna list a house and you wanna publicly market it and things, that it is actually marketed to other realtors and everybody else. If you're gonna carry it around in your pocket, then you have actually, if anybody finds out about it, violated the clear cooperation policy unless the seller has told you to do a couple things, and we're gonna touch on those here in just a second. So public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers, and people think funny about public marketing. Well, anything that you're doing pretty much is public marketing of the property, even if it's not in an MLS, it's public marketing. If flyers, displayed yard signs, digital marketing in public facing websites, broker website displays, digital communication, all of those things, those are all public marketing. And it does not include an office exclusive listing where there is something signed, and we'll get to what they have to sign here in a minute. But if there's something that the seller does not want to have happen, if it's something that's sold within the brokerage or one-to-one promotion that's going on between their clients, and then there are some things that you can do that avoid the clear cooperation. Otherwise, everything is to be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. Now, Sunday is the only day that's not a business day in the eyes of the MLS. So if you took a listing on Friday, you should have it in the MLS on Saturday. If you take it on Saturday, then you have until Monday. But anyway, within 1 business day. Okay, let's talk about coming soon for just a second. Coming soon was put in place to actually allow you to get your listing and to start exposing it to other brokers while work was being done on the property. Well, we want to list our property, but it's gonna take us about 2 weeks to finish getting the painting done and putting in the new carpet. Or whatever's going on with it. Alright, so you need some time to get that done. So you can still put it in the MLS as a coming soon property. Coming soon is only available and only accessible to other realtors that are part of that MLS. It does not get extracted from the MLS and pulled to Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com or any of those. It does not go to any of the public facing websites. It stays within the MLS, which means that only brokers that are a member of that MLS know that it's even coming soon. That doesn't give them permission, just because they know, it doesn't give them permission to go out and show it. Because that is one of the ideas of coming soon, is that it's not ready to market to the public. The seller does not want it to go and be seen by prospective buyers and things. The seller wants to wait. So the seller says, let's put it in coming soon. You have to tell them about it because they wouldn't know it otherwise. But I'd rather have a signed listing. If I went out today, I'd rather have a signed listing that wasn't gonna be ready to show for a couple of weeks than wait a couple of weeks to get a signed listing. And the reason is because once it's a signed contract, it's a signed contract, right? Doesn't matter if I get it signed today and we can't show it until 1st of March. I still have a signed contract. So the idea of getting something signed and committed while people are ready. And even a little before they are ready makes a difference. Now, coming soon. One of the cool things, a couple of the cool things about coming soon is that. Is somebody trying to ask a question? One of the things about coming soon is that days on market do not start accumulating. And so that's an advantage of the coming soon. It doesn't start until, because what is days on market? Well, it's not on market. Right? Cause it's going to be marketed when you actually make it active. So the maximum length of time that you can put it on coming soon status is 21 days. And you can't do an extension of coming soon. So just understand that 21 days. It's actually set in the computer to go active. You don't even do anything with it, it automatically goes active. You can, in the coming soon paperwork, you can have a date earlier than 21 days. You know, we need 1 more week to get it ready. We need 12 days to get it ready. We're not gonna be done until a week from Tuesday, okay? So now we can put that date in there and it will automatically bing you through those, or you can go through, and you can go through, by the way, you can go through and make it active whenever you want. You can go into the MLS, go to status. And you can change it to active whenever you feel like you want to, or the seller wants to. So that 21 days is not a magic number, other than at 21 days it goes active. But what if I'm not done with it by 21 days? What if we get to 21 days and I still have, the carpets didn't come in on time when it was supposed to and things? Well, then it's going to go active automatically. But at that point in time, you can also go back in there and change that status to hold do not show. And put a secondary date in there as to when it will actually be ready to go. So. From that standpoint, you can. Prolong it just a little bit, but. You do have to take, that's an activity that you'll have to take. Alright, so. Right here, seller does not authorize. Broker to market the property per the coming soon status in the MLS. Alright, this is just. For one thing, if you don't check anything, the default is that seller does authorize broker to market in the property per coming soon. If they don't want you to do it, then and they check do not, then you can't market it as coming soon. You'll have to either market it regularly or you'll have to change the date that you're going to list it. And below that, it says that seller instructs broker to market the property, the public beginning. And it says whatever the listing period is. Or they have a third option, and that is that seller instructs broker to exclude the property from dissemination by the MLS. I don't ever want it on the MLS. I don't want any public marketing. It's like, do you want to sell your house? And I probably wouldn't put it to them that way, but that's what's going on in my mind, right? Do you actually want to sell your house or not? Because public marketing is probably, if you're waiting for me personally to sell it. You're cutting down on exposure and increasing the length of time for the listing. I wouldn't take a 90-day listing if I couldn't do these things. I'd take a year listing if I had to do it myself. But anyway, you have to pay attention to those things. All right. Here's where you get the instruction on the date. Begin marketing the property to the public, including through the MLS on 1/1/25. Or not to market during the listing period unless seller gives written instructions otherwise. So right now you're telling me not to market it to the public period. So Seller understands and agrees that should any public marketing of the property occur, the property listing will be submitted. So if we go into public marketing, we put up signs, we hand out flyers, we put it on Google and Zillow and all of the sites and Facebook and things, so we put it on. Once we've done that, we actually only have 1 day to get it into the MLS. Now, obviously, that's going to be a self-enforcing thing. MLS doesn't have necessarily an enforcement body that goes out and sees if there's a sign up or anything like that. But if another agent turns you in, or if another agent calls and asks about it, or if another agent drives by and sees your sign up and tries to pull up information on the MLS and can't get it, then those are all grounds for a violation. So you only have that 1 day. Just remember that 1 business day. Just get it in there as soon as you can. All right. Not gonna cover too much else here, other than seller instructions. So, and this is just a little added instruction with regards to photographs and things, but basically. A allows us, or I mean, not A, but above here, talking about photographs, it tells us that we can take photographs of the property to help advertise it. Seller instruction says visitors are not restricted from taking pictures of the property. Okay, that's the default. That means that somebody else coming in and I'm taking people through the property and they wanna do a video, something or other with their phone, or they wanna take a few pictures of the inside, cause they're gonna go show mommy and daddy or whatever the case may be. Then they can do that. The next little checkbox says seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking of images is limited to those persons preparing appraisal or inspection report. So if you don't want Joe Blow or Terry Ryan or something like that going through and doing your and taking pictures of all your house, and some people are very private and some people have a lot of real expensive things in there. And some people have pictures of children all over the walls and on the fireplace mantle and things, and there are things that they don't want to go out to the world, so to speak. And it does go out to the world because once it hits the MLS, then all of those third parties, those Zillows and those Trulias and everything, they scrape the MLS information and they put it out on their websites. They don't go out and get those listings. You know, Trulia and Zillow and Realtor.com, they aren't out getting listings. They're taking our listings and they are advertising accordingly. So that is that form. Let's talk about open houses for a minute. We talked about that real briefly when I was talking about Greg's open house that he did this weekend and things, but anyway, we have an open house visitor, non-agency disclosure and sign in. And they revised this to say that highlighted area can be used for open house or individual private showing. All right, so this is kind of a brief sign in for somebody that actually still you sort of have representation to show them the house. But then there's also there's some, I don't know, Greg, when you did your open house, were there very many people that read the whole thing or did they just sign in as a guest register?
They just signed in.
Yeah, they just signed in. So if they actually read this, which almost nobody ever does, the agent is holding an open house or conducting in-person or live virtual tours of the property identified above, whatever that address is. And the visitor is interested in viewing the property, agent agrees to show property to the visitor on the following terms and condition. Agent does not represent visitor. Not yet, right? I may by the time you leave, but right now I don't. And unless otherwise in writing, agent is not working with or has entered into a representation agreement with the visitor. Now, you know, and we're gonna hit those in just a minute, but you know what those representation agreements look like. And we'll go there in just a second. The other, communication with the agent at an open house is for the benefit of the seller. So if you're going out and holding an open house, whether you're holding it for yourself or whether you're holding it for somebody else within the company or whatever the case may be, you are there for the benefit of the seller at that point in time, are you not? That's who you're representing. You don't know who's gonna come through the door, so you don't have representation agreements with anybody else. But you do have a representation agreement with the seller because you've gotten your listing signed. Communications with the agent are not confidential, so anything you tell me, I may tell the seller about it. If you wanna write an offer through the agent, at that time, the agent will disclose that the broker represents you exclusively for that house. That's all you're doing is you are representing exclusively for that house. And if the visitor wants to be represented, then we have a couple of other forms that we need to go to, because then we have to go to either our PSRA, which is the property showing and representation agreement, which is that little 2 1/3 pager that just says the basics of what the responsibilities are and what compensation might be involved. Or the BRBC, which is the 5 pager, that is broker representation and broker compensation agreement. And obviously, depends on what's going on the PSRA. You're limited in the number of properties you can show. You can only have a 30-day, and we'll talk about that in just a second, but you can only have a 30-day agreement. You can do extensions, but you can only have a 30-day agreement where the BRBC gives you longer time. All right, and they sign in here, and by signing in here, we have enough of a representation agreement to give them the base. Now, what if somebody comes in, and I asked Greg when we were talking about his open house this morning. If he had anybody that dug in their heels when they found out they had to sign a piece of paper or anything. And I'm sure that I could hear a bunch of stories out there where some people have and some people haven't and things. But basically, it hasn't been a big resistance. Basically, if you ask them to sign in, they'll sign in. Now, I don't know if they're signing in their right name. You know, I've held a lot of open houses in my life, and I am so proud to be able to tell you that I have had Mickey Mouse come through my open house. And I have also had, well, I've had several stars, I had a couple of basketball players. They weren't any taller than I was, but they had, you know, Michael Jordan or something was the name on there and stuff. You know what? I don't take a driver's license. I don't double check to find out who it is. I'm still representing the seller and showing them the house. Now, am I gonna get serious over Mickey Mouse? Probably not. I don't really know how to contact him. I'd have to knock doors at Disneyland and hope I got one of the doors that he was in. But the point is that you're off the hook. And that's what we're trying to accomplish. So NAR, in their settlement, said that one of the requirements was that we have something that initiates or establishes non-representation, that at least identifies the fact that it was offered, we talked about it. They opted not to. No, I'm not gonna sign anything. Well, I'm not gonna keep them out of the open house, but if they start asking me questions, then the only answers I'm gonna give them are the same ones that are on the flyer. That says the price of the house and how many bedrooms and how many bathrooms it has, and things, whatever I have on my open house flyer. That is going to be the extent of the conversation we have, unless there's representation determined of some kind. All right, so let's determine representation. This is the PSRA that we talked about, or that we alluded to a minute ago. So this actually says that I'm a ready buyer and C21 Masters broker. And the property that we're in right now is 3456 Orange Peel Way in Oceanside, California. So that's where we're at. That's the property that we're talking about. If you want further representation on this, I would love to do that for you. Let's just fill out this paperwork real quick and then we can move forward. But it says on here, broker agrees virtually or in person to show or give a tour of the property identified above. Buyer grants broker the non-exclusive, notice that word, non-exclusive right to represent buyer in acquiring the property identified above. And the terms are listed below. Here's the terms. This is today. This agreement is only in effect for 30 days, that's the maximum, says right here, not to exceed 30 days. So I go for the maximum. And then it says compensation, so the amount or rate of real estate commission is not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually. So that's us, we're the broker individually, and we're discussing it with the buyer, so it's negotiable between the buyer and the broker. And the. Notice that it says sample only, because it said right above here that it's always negotiable, but I can't put negotiable in here. I tried to put X and a half or something like that, it doesn't accept the X. It only accepts the half, and I don't wanna work for a half, so I made sure that I put sample only here to know that, so that you know that it's still negotiable. But I put 3% on the acquisition price. Or, and here it says, see attached broker created compensation schedule. Now personally, well, both as a company and personally, we don't have a compensation schedule. But what a compensation schedule consists of is that there are agents and brokerages out there that have put level of compensation based on value of house. So if I sell you and I don't have one in front of me, but so if the house we find is under $800,000, then my fee is 3%. But if it's $1.5 million, then it could be 2.5%. Or if it's 3 million, it could be 2%. And I'm just using those numbers as samples just to explain. So this percentage is negotiable between you and the buyer that you're gonna represent. And then notice the payments received by broker from seller. And I emphasize this to people because I say, oh, I know that you're signing this that says that you're making sure that I get 3% or whatever it is. But if broker receives compensation from the seller, which is what we're going to ask for in our negotiation and when we write our offer, then that amount can be credited against your obligation to pay. And we can change that if we want to. There's a form that we're gonna hit in just a second that says how to change that. And it says that broker shall not receive any amount in excess. That's why I put 3% in there. If I put 2% in there and the other party was offering out 2.5. I don't get the 2.5, I still only get 2 or whatever I agreed to in there. But notice that I keep throwing different numbers in because they are negotiable numbers and I don't know what kind of commissions are gonna be negotiated by everybody. But I can't receive more than I've agreed to. So if I've agreed to 2 and they were willing to pay 3. Then I cost myself 1%. And so I put it in at whatever I want and whatever I can negotiate. And that's the number we go by. Alright, continuation period. Continuation period shall be, and I've heard all kinds of things on this. Sometimes people put short continuation periods. But what a continuation period is simply if I have shown you the property and I've done all the work that I'm supposed to, and I've been a very involved broker and things in your deal here. And you don't buy. And then 30, 60, 90 days, you come back to the table with a different agent and write it on your own, or even without a different agent, if you come back and write it with just the seller themselves. Saying, oh yeah, well, if we kind of squeeze him out. And I put it that way for you guys, but it's not, I wouldn't put that to the buyer to even let them know that that might be an option, but if something happens. On this property as an exclusive, because we put it as an exclusive up here, if you remember. That we have exclusive and we have non-exclusive in our representation agreements. So here, if somebody else came to the table within a time frame, whatever that is, say I put in 90 days. If they come to the table within 90 days within something else, now how am I gonna find that out? Well, I don't know, I have to be, that's me, that's on me as a broker. To follow up to find out if that house was sold. If I keep looking at the MLS and finally find out that it was sold. Then do I want to go to the title company after it closes and find out who it's sold to? And do I want to go after the other broker or doing something while they were represented by me? And that requires activity on my part. I would have to do something. It's not automatically that a seller is going to write you a check, or that escrow is gonna cut you a check, or that you just put into escrow for your amount that you think you should be due. That doesn't happen. It requires mediation, arbitration, perhaps court, probably small claims court, but whatever it is, it requires something. So here's and this kind of says what I just said, is that it's on a default by somebody, and the timing of compensation, it's up to us to follow through. So I'm gonna move along here just a little bit, because we still have several things to cover. So here's the BRBC. And when this came out, which it's come out twice, actually, it came out once in August and then it was revised by December. And they're continuing to make a couple of little adjustments on it and things like that. One of the forms we're gonna look at here in a minute, actually. Usually June and December are the only times that forms are released. However, during important times with important things going on and with DOJ and NAR and other people involved, everybody's time schedules are a little different, so these forms came out at different times. This is the most recent one. It came out at the end of December. And so we've had it for 6 or 7 weeks now. But this basically is our representation, and this says that beginning on such and such a day and ending on such and such a day, and notice it's 3 months. It even says here in parentheses, not to exceed 3 months. If representation period exceeds 3 months, this agreement is void. All right, so basically on a 1 to 4, when I'm just representing somebody in the purchase of a property. If I come out with dates after this, it's void. Type of representation, non-exclusive or exclusive. Depends on what kind of property you're dealing with and how much time you intend to dedicate to it. If somebody wants a specific piece of property or a specific type of property, then maybe I'm gonna make it exclusive because I'm gonna put more time into it. But if they're only looking for a house in Santa Ana, then maybe I'm non-exclusive because I'm not gonna be as tied down. Maybe I don't wanna be as tied down to these people. Maybe they're already working with other people, and so I can't cut them out because they already have representation with other people. So there are reasons that I would go non-exclusive, defaults to non-exclusive. If I check nothing, it's non-exclusive. All right, and if I check exclusive, then on the last page, which is 2 pages more, a couple more pages deep here, it's going to have another place so for somebody to sign that says that they understand the difference between exclusivity and non-exclusive. Property type, so it defaults to single family resident. Or if you're not looking for a single family residence, if you're looking for a commercial, if you're looking for vacant land, if you're looking for something else, then don't look for a single family residence for me, okay? So we check that box. You told me not to look for a single family residence. So people ask, and here it answers it for you, but we'll answer it again, and that is, Terry, do I have to have a BRBC if I'm just showing a piece of land? What if I'm showing commercial or something? Well, yes, the answer is that if you're showing property, you have to have a BRBC. And it says here what they're looking for. As you go down through here, I want 5 or more units. I don't want to be restricted to 4. I want industrial, I want vacant land, I want commercial. I want something that I can do a tenant in common with. I want this, and you may have a specific property. I don't know what that is, but they always leave a blank just in case you come up with that property that Nobody really knows what it is. Location, counties, be realistic. Don't put Southern California counties, or don't list 5 counties in there. There's a couple of things that you have to take into consideration. One is that are you licensed to sell in the whole state of California? And the answer to that is yes, you are. You have a California state real estate license. So you are licensed to sell in the entire state. You may be licensed in more than one state. That's okay too. But are you competent in all of those counties? I've been licensed since 1989. And I've sold, I don't know, a couple thousand properties in my life. And there are perimeters on where I would go to sell property, because if I get to some places, I am not competent in that area. I would not sell property in San Francisco, even if somebody told me that I could sell it for 4 million instead of for 700,000 here. Because I don't know anything about San Francisco. I would refer it to one of our good agents out of one of our San Francisco or our Bay Area offices and wait for my referral fee to come in. But at least I know that I did what I could for that. So I'm not going to put multiple places that I'm not familiar with. Same thing with cities. If somebody asked me for something in the city, we have lots of cities that overlap, kind of, don't we? We have cities that it's like you're still in buildings until you. I swear that some of the cities we have, the building is in 2 different cities. It almost seems like they're that close together. They're divided by one road that goes through here, but the road is really just something for a delivery truck to go down. Doesn't really matter. Am I competent? And am I really going to service and represent people in those cities? And if I'm not, my broker involvement is going to be so minimal that I would really have a hard time collecting anything if somebody decided not to pay me for it. All right, if the buyer gives you specific things on properties, we have a buyer identification and preferences form that they could fill it out, and they could say, so I showed a property the other day that they actually called me on and things, and it was a horse ranch. And it was in an area that I'm comfortable with and things, but we went up to the horse ranch and it had, it had warming pens and training pens, and it had running and jumping areas, and it had 2 barns, and it had all kinds of things there. Well, if somebody chose to put down all of those things as being identifiers, then it's going to make it a little more difficult for me to go about finding a property. And I'm probably going to spend a lot of additional time on it and things. But they may have all those things in mind. Property in Riverside County wouldn't cut it if they had all those things in mind. So whatever those happen to be, probably you won't have very much of those, very many of those actually put in there. And are there any properties that I don't want representation on? Well, I've already been talking with John down the street, and he says that he might sell me my investment or his investment property. Okay, well, so that's the property that we can identify as being excluded. I'll continue to look for other things. You let me know if that changes, but what's that address? And I put it in here. If I need more, then I can do all of these properties. So here again, we're talking about compensation. It doesn't change from where we were before. Amount of compensation, this is a sample only, but you put in what you guys agreed to. And again, it says the same thing. If I receive compensation from the seller, then that amount will be credited against buyer's obligation to pay. So if I have a 3% in here and somebody is offering a 2.5%, and everybody decides to take that, I have 2 choices. One is that we change the amount that we agreed to here, or the other thing is the buyer can pay the difference. Either one of those is acceptable. So one of those might be good for referrals, one of those might not be, so you think of those things. Alright, this box here, I don't know why I didn't highlight that, but anyway, buyer does not have sufficient funds to pay broker. If they check that, if they're selling a house. And they're gonna walk away with $400,000. Then I'm not going to buy off on this, I'm going to tell them that certainly they would have enough money to pay it, but we're still gonna ask the seller for it. But if they didn't, you would have enough money to pay it. But if they're dealing with something where they're barely eking in anything, or they're first time buyers and they're having trouble getting down payment. I, as a broker, can choose whether or not I wanna work with them and hope that I can get it from the seller. Hope that the other agent has had that discussion with the seller and I can still ask for it from them. But at this point, it's if I. Choose to work with them, even though I know they don't have enough funds to pay me. Then I'm relying. Totally on whether or not the seller. Is willing to pay, and that comes out in the purchase agreement. But I can do it, but everybody knows. Alright. So here's just a couple of the exclusive and non-exclusive, non-exclusive representation, broker involvement. Compensation is payable only if there was broker involvement with the property. So non-exclusive means that I have to be involved. Or they can have somebody else that's involved. They can go to me, if I don't do my job in finding a property, they can go to Greg. And he'll find them a property, and who gets paid? Greg. So that's the way non-exclusive works, it doesn't tie them down, it ties them down if I am involved. And actually it covers that in this next little section. Buyer physically entered and was shown property by broker. Broker showed the property to the buyer virtually, virtually is okay. As long as I provided it and they weren't just searching on Google and found something. Or Zillow or something. Buyer or broker submitted us to the seller a signed written offer, that certainly shows involvement, doesn't it? If I performed market analysis related to the property, reviewed different documents and disclosures with the buyer. That's all good. The property was introduced to the buyer by the broker. However. This is an important part here. However, merely sending the buyer a list of properties is not deemed broker involvement. So if I didn't do anything except for make some printouts out of the MLS and shoot it over to them. Or if I gave them a client password to get into the MLS, depending on what MLS I'm involved in. Because there's client portals out there, that's not involvement. And it's not considered involvement, and if they wrote the offer through the listing agent or something like that, I would have no recourse. So think of what involvement is, it's written here and you're actually agreeing to do those things. Alright. Get down to our last couple forms here. This is that box that I told you about, when it said earlier that if it's exclusive, that box 15 also needs to be initialed. And this actually explains it a little deeper. If exclusive is checked in paragraph 2A, the agreement shall be exclusive, broker shall devote time and resources to meet buyer in finding and acquiring the property and be expected to get paid. Buyer shall not enter into another representation agreement in conflict with this agreement. So if I have an exclusive on a property, then he is agreeing here to not sign up with another broker. On this property, can he sign up on other properties? He can. But on this property, it's exclusive, on this type of property, it's exclusive. Compensation, broker is entitled to compensation if buyer acquires property during the representation period. Alright, with or without broker involvement, that's kind of the key on there, that also helps us with that continuation period there. That we went over just a couple of minutes ago. And cancellation, either buyer or broker may unilaterally cancel this agreement by giving the other 30 days written notice. Okay, so either person, I'm fed up with them, I've shown them everything I can show them, we've gone out to that property several times, I'm getting tired of it, or whatever the case may be, you could cancel. They could say, you know what, we've called and called and called him and we can't ever get him to return a call to us, and when he finally does, then it takes him a couple more days to get back to us with the information we asked for and things, that they can cancel it because you aren't giving them the time that they think they're paying for. All right, 2 quick things or 3 quick things that we're gonna cover, and then we'll be done by 11:15, I think, like I promised. Everybody can get on to their other stuff. So, transfer of buyer representation agreement. All right, so I'm changing companies. Not really, or at least I don't think so, but so. Randy decides that I would be better suited at Caldwell Banker. And so we're changing companies, or somebody made that agreement, place, okay, so I can transfer representation by filling out one of these. I can keep the client, so to speak, because the one that they signed before said C21 Masters. Well, now C21 Masters is transferring this agreement to whoever it is, the new broker. And maybe there's gonna be a little bit of payout because I've had some time and effort, maybe there's not any payout. But it can be transferred, so it's not a lifetime thing. Last couple of things I wanna hit on real quick. And that is that. This is the listing agreement that I was referring to. I only put a couple of pages in here just to take care of a couple of things, but. We have a listing period, everybody understands that, not to exceed 24 months, you may or may not understand that, but that is the rule. If it is a manufactured home, or if there's probate involved or anything else, it's still a single family residence, even if it's a manufactured home. However, it requires that we check this because it downloads a separate piece of paper for us that says it's a manufactured home, and it asks for serial numbers and things like that. So once you check this box, that will automatically be downloaded to the packet that you're putting together. Compensation, we negotiate that, again, it's always negotiated. I put sample only and I put sample only. 3% is what I'm gonna charge to sell your property. That is the seller's side only of the transaction. Says it right there, only seller's side. And I emphasize at that point in time, because what am I dealing against at that point in time? If I put in 3, and in the past, these people have sold houses at say 5% or 6% or 7% or whatever it was, they've got a different thing in mind. So they see 3 and they go, oh, you're only gonna charge us 3. So that gives me a good chance at that point in time to explain to them that, yes, I'm only gonna charge you 3. I say that that's the seller's side of the transaction. When the buyer comes to the table, the buyer's agent is going to ask for something. 2%, 3%, whatever it is they ask for. We'll be able to negotiate that at that time. We'll see what their offer is. We'll see if it substantiates paying 2%, 2.5%, 3%, whatever. And we'll make that evaluation when the time comes. But I want you to know that the buyer's agent doesn't work for free. And so they are going to be asking for something in there. And it'll probably come out very nearly what you paid when you sold your last house. If you sold your last house, what did you pay? What percentage did you pay when you sold your last house? Oh, I think we paid 6%. Okay, well, more than likely, my 3% and their 2 or 2.5 or whatever they ask for, is gonna come out with something up to that, but probably not exceeding that, but we'll evaluate it at the time and we can always counteroffer it. The nice thing about it being written into the agreements is that it emphasizes in the highlighted area, even though it's kind of not highlighted, I mean, they accent it on the paperwork itself in a light blue, but for some reason on the scanner, it comes out gray. But anyway, that it's still negotiable. Additional compensation to seller's broker if buyer is unrepresented. Well, have we done that in the past? Yes, we have. This is just put in a different framework than it was before. But in the past, I've seen something that says, and again, sample only, 6% commission. And then in the additional terms, it says, if sold by the listing agent, commission will be 4% or 4.5% or whatever. And it's a different amount because you're handling both sides of it and everything's a lot easier and things. So whether it's so if it's an unrepresented buyer, then that's cool. I get some. Here's continuation right. I put 90 days in here. And obviously, if they have obligations to previous brokers and things, I have to really think about whether or not I'm going to take that. Why would I have something to another? Well, because of what we just talked about before about exclusive representation and non-exclusive representation. If they're coming to me on a house that's been shown to them by another broker, that they already have an agreement in place, they just don't like working with them, is there a potential for it to cost us money? And the answer is yes. Okay. I think the last thing that we're gonna cover on this, I think. So we're almost there. All right, so this is publication of seller's willingness to consider concessions. And if you remember before, you may not, I don't even, we've got so many new people coming on that I may know about the remembering before thing and stuff, it's just like this is part of it now. If checked below, seller authorizes broker to market that the seller is willing to consider offers asking for concessions. And we have the opportunity to check those boxes. And I would explain to people what concessions are. And there's a place on the agreement that actually explains what they are. Concessions can be everything from buyer's closing costs to whatever. Let's see, I didn't load that page. I only loaded the first two. But anyway, it goes through and it breaks down the possible concessions that somebody would ask for. Well, if the price is right, will sellers pay concessions? And concessions can include broker agent or buyer's agent compensation. So this is allowing me to say that I can put it in the MLS, not the amount, but I can put in the fact that the seller is willing to consider offers asking for compensation or concessions. And in any other marketing outside of the MLS. So if they tell me I can put it on flyers, I can put it on the internet, I can put it on whatever I want to, this gives me the right to do that because these boxes are checked and they're signing off on it. All right. This is a brand new form. Look at how brand new it is. This one, revised 1/25. So that is within the last couple of weeks that's come out. And what this has to do with is it has to do with the brand new law that started January 1st. And what it is it says that if you have tenants. So you have rental properties, you have an apartment unit, you have a fourplex, you have a whatever. We have to show them this and they have the right to, by filling out the right checkbox on here. And asking for it, they have the right to ask us as to provide information to one of the 3 credit bureaus on how regularly they pay. It's to help them as tenants establish a credit history through their rent. And that can be good for some and not so good for others. I have several rental properties and one I collected $1,100 on the first and I collected $400 about a week later and $190 this Sunday. So it's kind of like, okay, so I chose to do it. She's been there a long time and I understand she's going through some difficulties right now, so I'm trying to work with her. But I don't think she'd want that reported that she was up to almost a month late getting rent in. But anyway, so here are the perimeters. The property in which the premises is located contains 16 or more residential units. Or the property in which the president is located can 15 or fewer, and both of the following apply. housing provider owns more than one residential rental property. Alright, so I have several rental properties, so I fall into that category. I don't have 15
When we do
or
this, with
16, yeah, exactly. But I do have enough that, I do have enough that gets me over this one.
oof,
Okay, or if the housing provider is a real estate investment trust, we call those REITs. And you'll hear about REITs all the time and things, so it's a real estate investment trust. Or a corporation or liability, so there are some things here that says that I have to do it. Or if there's an exemption, housing provider is not required to report the revenue to at least. Because the provider does not meet either of the criteria above. So I could check this when I give it to my tenant and say, I don't have to do this because I only own one house. So if I'm a little mom and popper and, grandma and grandpa own this one rental property that they've had for the last 20 years. But it's passive income to them. I don't have to do that. But if I have more than one, I do. And then it goes through here and it says what the tenant wants me to do and how I have to notify them and things and how to opt out of it. The tenant doesn't have to do that. They can opt out here if they want to. I worry about that a little bit. But then I'd also be happy for it. Because it saves me work because I don't have to report it to one of the credit agencies. But if they say, oh, no, we don't want you reporting to the credit agency, I'm thinking. Huh, how many leads are we gonna have? Wouldn't you, I mean, wouldn't your mind kind of go there whether you wanted to or not? And then the tenant signs it if they want to opt into this. Or they sign it here if they want to opt out. And then we're supposed to keep that in our tenant file. If they opted in, we are supposed to, as a landlord, report it. So those of you that are representing landlords and things, the information is out. They may already know about it. And then lastly, and we're not gonna go through this, but I wanted you to see all of the December form releases. So this is a quick summary of all of the forms. A lot of them do not apply to what we do on a daily basis. Some of it's just a word change or something else, so we didn't spend time going through word changes. But it's alphabetical and it goes on for several pages. But if you downloaded your information that Carolyn put in the chat earlier, you can see all of the forms that got changed during the December release. And we just left CAR meetings a couple of weeks ago. And there are some others coming down for the June release. But anyway, that's everything that's been done and a little explanation as to why. So I hope that helps you a little bit. I hope it doesn't confuse you further than you already thought you were confused. If you have any questions, now would be a good time to just shout out and ask them. I can stop sharing so I can see faces. Wow, all those pretty faces that I don't get to see. Especially Fred. Yeah, that's a pretty face there, Fred. All right. I'm gonna assume that we're all good. Call me if you have any questions or thoughts or anything else. And we'll talk soon. Have a good day. All right. We're done.
All right. That's good.
Just looked at the calendar. I think we have a class on something tomorrow.